The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine grounds of Windsor Castle as Queen Camilla prepared for what she believed would be a routine inspection of the royal guard. It was her first solo ceremonial duty since ascending to her role, and she was determined to make a lasting impression on both the guards and the watching media. Dressed in an elegant navy blue coat with pearl accessories, Camilla walked confidently toward the parade ground where 30 of Britain's finest soldiers stood at attention. Their red uniforms were immaculate, their boots polished to a mirror shine, and their tall black bearskin hats perfectly positioned. The morning air was crisp, and the sound of her heels clicking against the cobblestones echoed through the courtyard. As she approached the formation, Camilla noticed one guard in particular who stood slightly apart from the others. Sergeant James Morrison, a decorated veteran with 15 years of service, maintained his position with unwavering discipline. His medals gleamed in the sunlight, telling stories of courage and dedication that few civilians could truly comprehend. The Queen Consort had been briefed on the protocol, but she felt confident enough to add her own touch to the proceedings. She had always admired the way royalty commanded respect through simple gestures, and today she wanted to demonstrate her authority in a way that would be remembered. "Attention!" called the commanding officer, and the entire formation snapped to an even more rigid stance. Camilla smiled slightly, feeling the power of the moment wash over her. This was her time to shine, her opportunity to show that she belonged in this world of tradition and ceremony. She began her walk along the line of guards, nodding approvingly at each soldier. Their eyes remained fixed straight ahead, as protocol demanded, but she could sense their awareness of her presence. The photographers positioned around the courtyard captured every moment, their cameras clicking softly in the background. When she reached Sergeant Morrison, Camilla paused. Something about his bearing, his obvious experience, and the weight of his service record made her want to acknowledge him specifically. She had read about his tours in Afghanistan and his commendations for bravery under fire. Here was a man who truly embodied the spirit of the British military. "Sergeant Morrison," she said, her voice carrying across the silent courtyard, "I want you to give me your finest salute." The request was unusual. Typically, guards saluted when the royal family passed, but asking for a specific demonstration was not part of the established protocol. The commanding officer shifted slightly, uncertain about this deviation from the planned ceremony. Morrison remained perfectly still, his face expressionless behind the strap of his bearskin hat. Years of military training had taught him to follow orders without question, but something about this request felt different. He had served under 4 different monarchs and knew the traditions better than most palace officials. "I said, give me your finest salute, Sergeant," Camilla repeated, this time with more authority in her voice. She expected immediate compliance, as she had grown accustomed to receiving from palace staff and officials. The silence stretched across the courtyard like a heavy blanket. Other guards remained frozen in their positions, but their attention was now focused on the unfolding scene. The photographers sensed something significant was happening and adjusted their positions to capture better angles. Morrison finally spoke, his voice steady and respectful but firm. "Your Majesty, I salute the crown and those who have earned my respect through service to our nation. I cannot simply perform a salute on command as entertainment." The words hung in the air like thunder before a storm. Camilla's confident expression began to falter as she realized that her simple request had been refused. In front of dozens of witnesses, cameras, and fellow guards, this sergeant had politely but decisively declined to follow her order. Her cheeks began to flush with a mixture of embarrassment and anger. She had expected immediate obedience, the kind of respectful compliance that she had grown used to receiving. Instead, she found herself facing a man who clearly had his own understanding of honor and duty. "Excuse me?" she said, her voice rising slightly. "I am asking you to perform a simple military courtesy." Morrison's response was measured and calm. Your Majesty, a salute is not a performance. It is a gesture of respect that comes from the heart and is earned through service. I cannot manufacture that respect on demand. The commanding officer stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. He had served in the military for over 20 years and understood both the importance of following orders and the deeper meaning behind Morrison's words. This was uncharted territory, and he wasn't sure how to navigate it. Camilla looked around at the assembled guards, the photographers, and the few palace officials who had accompanied her. Everyone was watching, everyone was listening, and everyone would remember this moment. What was supposed to be a triumphant display of her authority was quickly becoming something entirely different. The morning sun seemed brighter now, almost harsh, as it illuminated the scene playing out in the courtyard. The silence was broken only by the distant sound of traffic beyond the castle walls and the soft whisper of wind through the ancient trees. Morrison continued to stand at attention. His gaze fixed straight ahead, but his message was clear. He had drawn a line between respect that was earned and respect that was demanded. In that moment, the experienced sergeant had given Queen Camilla a lesson in dignity that she had never expected to receive. The tension in the courtyard was thick enough to cut with a knife as Queen Camilla struggled to regain her composure. Her face had turned a deep shade of red that clashed with her carefully chosen navy outfit. She had never been publicly challenged like this, especially not in front of cameras that were capturing every moment of her humiliation. "Sergeant Morrison," she said, her voice trembling slightly with barely controlled anger, "I am ordering you to salute me immediately." The veteran soldier remained unmoved, his eyes still fixed on a point somewhere beyond the castle walls. In his 15 years of service, he had faced enemy fire, survived explosions, and watched good soldiers die in foreign lands. This moment, as uncomfortable as it was, paled in comparison to the real challenges he had encountered. "Your Majesty," Morrison replied with the same steady tone, "I have given my salutes to those who earned them. To the flag when I swore my oath, to the fallen when I attended their funerals, and to leaders who demonstrated true service to our nation. A salute is not a trick to be performed on command." The other guards remained perfectly still, but the electricity of the moment was palpable. Many of them had served under Morrison's leadership at some point in their careers. They respected him not just for his rank, but for his integrity and his unwavering commitment to the values that made the military special. Captain Williams, the commanding officer, found himself in an impossible position. He understood the chain of command and the importance of respecting the royal family, but he also recognized the deeper principle that Morrison was defending. Military tradition was built on honor, not on empty gestures. Camilla turned to Captain Williams, her eyes blazing with indignation. "Captain, I expect you to discipline this soldier immediately. His behavior is completely unacceptable." Williams straightened his shoulders and took a deep breath. He had hoped to avoid this confrontation, but the moment of truth had arrived. "Your Majesty, Sergeant Morrison has not violated any military regulation. He has simply expressed his understanding of what a military salute represents." The Queen Consort's mouth fell open in shock. Not only had one guard defied her, but now the commanding officer was supporting that defiance. Her carefully planned ceremony was crumbling around her, and she could feel the eyes of everyone present watching her lose control of the situation. "This is outrageous," she stammered, looking around desperately for support. The palace officials who had accompanied her seemed frozen, unsure of how to handle this unprecedented situation. They had dealt with protocol disputes before, but nothing like this. Morrison finally turned his head slightly to look directly at Queen Camilla. His eyes were not disrespectful, but they held a quiet strength that came from years of facing real danger and making difficult decisions. "Your Majesty, With all due respect, you have not earned my salute. A salute is given to the crown, to the flag, and to those who have demonstrated their commitment to serving others before themselves." The words hit Camilla like a physical blow. In front of 30 guards, photographers, and palace staff, this sergeant had essentially told her that she was not worthy of the military honor she had demanded. The humiliation was complete and public. "How dare you?" she whispered, her voice barely audible but filled with venom. "How dare you question my worthiness?" Morrison's response was calm and measured. "Your Majesty, I have served my country in 3 combat zones. I have carried wounded soldiers to safety, and I have stood guard over the bodies of fallen comrades. My salute is not a casual gesture. It is a sacred acknowledgement of sacrifice and service." One of the younger guards, Private Thompson, began to shift slightly. He was torn between his respect for Morrison and his awareness of the protocols he had been taught. The situation was unlike anything he had encountered in his training. Captain Williams stepped forward again, his voice carefully controlled. "Your Majesty, perhaps we could continue the inspection in a different manner. The men are prepared to demonstrate their drill formations and present arms as part of the ceremonial review." But Camilla was beyond diplomatic solutions. Her pride had been wounded in the most public way possible, and she was not willing to simply move on. "No, Captain. I want this soldier to follow my direct order. I want him to salute me right now." Morrison stood even straighter, if that was possible. "Your Majesty, I will not compromise the integrity of my uniform or my service by performing empty gestures. If you wish to earn my salute, then demonstrate the leadership and service that military honors represent." The photographers were having a field day. This was the kind of unscripted drama that rarely occurred during royal events. The story would be front-page news before the sun set, and palace officials were already dreading the media storm that would follow. Camilla looked around the courtyard one more time, seeing the faces of soldiers who clearly supported their sergeant, officials who were powerless to help her, and cameras that were recording every moment of her defeat. The morning that was supposed to establish her authority had instead revealed her fundamental misunderstanding of respect and leadership. "This is not over," she said finally, her voice shaking with a mixture of rage and humiliation. "This is absolutely not over." But even as she spoke those words, everyone present knew that it was indeed over. Queen Camilla had learned a lesson about the difference between demanded respect and earned respect, and that lesson had come at the cost of her dignity in front of the entire world. The aftermath of the confrontation spread through the palace like wildfire. Within hours, every staff member, security officer, and administrator had heard about what happened in the courtyard. The story grew with each telling, but the core facts remained the same. Queen Camilla had been publicly refused by a decorated sergeant who questioned her worthiness of military respect. As the day progressed, the media got hold of the story. The photographs and video footage from the morning ceremony showed everything clearly. There was no way to spin or minimize what had occurred. Social media exploded with discussions about respect, military tradition, and the role of the modern monarchy. Sergeant Morrison returned to his regular duties as if nothing had happened. His fellow soldiers treated him with even greater respect than before, if that was possible. He had stood up for principles that they all understood and valued. In the military canteen that evening, conversations were hushed but supportive. Morrison had done what many of them wished they could have done. Queen Camilla, meanwhile, spent the rest of the day in emergency meetings with palace officials and public relations experts. The phones had not stopped ringing with calls from newspapers, television networks, and international media outlets. Everyone wanted the palace's official response to the morning's events. "Your Majesty," said Sir Richard Hampton, the palace's chief communications officer, "we need to address this situation immediately. The story is spreading globally, and the public reaction is not favorable. Camilla sat in her private office, still wearing the same navy outfit from the morning, but now it seemed less regal and more like a costume. Her confidence had been shattered by a single soldier who refused to play along with her expectations. "What are people saying?" she asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Sir Richard cleared his throat uncomfortably. The public response has been largely supportive of Sergeant Morrison. Many veterans and active service members are calling him a hero for defending military traditions. There are hashtags trending on social media praising his integrity. The words hit Camilla like a series of hammer blows. Not only had she been humiliated in person, but now the entire world was celebrating her humiliation and treating the sergeant like a hero. The situation could not possibly get worse. "And what about support for me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sir Richard exchanged glances with his colleagues before answering. "Your Majesty, the public sentiment is that Sergeant Morrison was correct in his assessment. Many people are questioning whether demanding a salute was appropriate, and there's significant discussion about earning respect versus expecting it. King Charles, who had been briefed on the situation, requested a private meeting with his wife. When he entered her office that evening, his expression was serious but not unsympathetic. "Camilla," he said gently, "we need to talk about what happened today." She looked up at him with eyes that were red from crying and frustration. "Charles, that sergeant humiliated me in front of everyone. He refused a direct order from his queen." Charles sat down across from her and chose his words carefully. "My dear, he wasn't refusing an order from his queen. He was defending the integrity of military tradition. There's a difference between commanding respect and earning it." Those words, coming from her husband, were perhaps the most painful of all. Even Charles understood what she had failed to grasp. The realization began to sink in that maybe, just maybe, Sergeant Morrison had been right. Meanwhile, back at the barracks, Morrison was preparing for bed when Captain Williams approached him. "Sergeant, I wanted you to know that I've received calls from the Ministry of Defense. They're standing behind your actions today." Morrison nodded but showed no sign of celebration. "Captain, I didn't do what I did for recognition. I did it because some things are too important to compromise." "I understand that, Sergeant, but you should know that your actions today reminded everyone what military service really means. A lot of people needed that reminder." As the news cycle continued into the following days, public opinion remained firmly on Morrison's side. Veterans organizations issued statements supporting his position. Military historians appeared on television programs explaining the sacred nature of military salutes and why they cannot be treated as entertainment. Queen Camilla found herself in an impossible position. Any attempt to punish Morrison would only make her look more petty and vindictive. Any public statement defending her actions would invite further criticism about her understanding of military culture. 3 days after the incident, she made a decision that surprised everyone. She requested a private meeting with Sergeant Morrison. They met in a small conference room at Windsor Castle. Morrison arrived in his dress uniform, standing at attention until she gestured for him to sit. "Sergeant Morrison," she began, her voice much quieter than it had been in the courtyard, "I have spent the last few days thinking about what you said to me." Morrison remained silent, waiting for her to continue. "I realize now that I misunderstood what I was asking of you. A salute is not something that should be demanded as a performance." Morrison's expression softened slightly. "Your Majesty, I never intended to cause you embarrassment. I was simply defending something that I hold sacred." Camilla nodded slowly. "I understand that now. Perhaps you could help me understand how I might earn the respect of the military rather than simply expecting it." For the first time since the confrontation, Morrison smiled slightly. "Your Majesty, respect in the military comes through service. It comes through putting others before yourself and understanding the weight of responsibility. It cannot be commanded, it must be demonstrated. The private meeting lasted for over an hour. When it ended, both participants had gained a new understanding of each other. Morrison had seen that Queen Camilla was capable of learning and growth, while she had gained insight into the values that truly mattered to those who served. The public never learned the details of that private conversation, but they did notice a change in Queen Camilla's approach to military events. She began volunteering at veterans' hospitals, supporting military families, and learning about the real challenges faced by service members. Sergeant Morrison continued his service with dignity, never speaking publicly about the incident that made him famous. He had stood up for his principles when it mattered most, and that was enough for him. The story became a turning point, not just for Queen Camilla's public image, but for the broader conversation about leadership, respect, and the true meaning of service. Sometimes the most important lessons come from the most unexpected teachers, and on that crisp morning at Windsor Castle, a decorated sergeant taught a queen the difference between demanding respect and earning it.